Hey everyone, in this video I am sharing 5 healthy, easy dinner recipes with you that we love cooking during spring when everything gets a little bit lighter. I have a printout of all the recipes. You can grab the link in the description box below this video. The first night I made some pasta. I actually sometimes like to make my own pasta, but for this recipe you can absolutely use store-bought pasta. Then in a cast iron skillet I roasted some pine nuts. I made a roux in a pot over the stove by melting some butter and adding some flour and then adding some broth to it. I added a good amount of goat cheese, a little bit of lemon juice and lemon zest, and made that into a nice sauce. Fresh pasta cooks really fast. If you use store-bought pasta, you want to start this a little bit earlier. And I boiled the pasta for just a few minutes with the homemade pasta that goes really quick. If you're using store-bought, just use the directions on the package. And about 2 or 3 minutes before the pasta is done, I added cut up green asparagus, just until everything is tender. I drained it through a colander and put it right back into my pot, and not draining too much because you want to retain some of the cooking liquid. And then I simply pour the sauce over the pasta, mix it up really well, and then plate it up, sprinkle some pine nuts over it, and grate a generous amount of fresh Parmesan over it. The next night for my potato leek soup, I had cleaned and washed one big leek and cut that into small rings. And I have some spring onions there and some spring garlic, but you can just use leeks on its own. I also cut up a little bit of celery and some regular onions. In a big pot over this medium heat, I melted some butter and sauteed all the onions and leeks in the butter just until soft and translucent. Turn the heat to very low and let that cook a little bit. In the meantime, I peeled potatoes. Cut them into smaller pieces and added them to the onions with some water and boiled everything until the potatoes were soft and done. Using a stick blender, or you can also use any regular blender, I pureed the soup. If you like it just a little bit chunky, you don't have to blend it very much. And if you like that very creamy and homogeneous, you might like to blend it all the way through. I picked some fresh parsley from the garden, and with my Mezzaluna, German for Wiegemesser, rocking knife, I chopped the parsley. I had seasoned the soup with salt and pepper to taste, and then while plating it into big soup plates, and sprinkle a good amount of parsley on top and some sour cream. The next night we had white asparagus. That can be a little bit more of a German thing, so whenever I see white asparagus in the markets, I always buy a lot. It has a more delicate flavor than the green asparagus, and it needs to be peeled. My husband was baking some salmon in the oven, some salmon that he had caught that we still had in the freezer, but any salmon or any meat or protein will work. In a big pot over the stove, I had brought water to boil. I added some lemon juice, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt, and some butter, and added the asparagus to the boiling water and cooked it over low heat just until tender, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I also melted some butter in a smaller skillet over the stove and added breadcrumbs to it, which is really delicious over the asparagus. It's probably more breadcrumbs than I needed, so I just add a little bit more butter to the breadcrumbs. The salmon was done. I had also boiled some potatoes and peeled them, since I had boiled them with a peel. And to plate them up, I put some asparagus on a plate, some boiled potatoes. I sprinkled the butter breadcrumb mixture over the asparagus, and then just added a piece of salmon. For next night's dinner, I washed some potatoes and with the peel cut them into smaller chunks or quarters. Put them in a baking dish. Added a good helping of olive oil and some salt and pepper to it, and roasted them in the oven at about 375 degrees until tender. In the meantime, I used the carrot tops to make the carrot top pesto, which is really delicious. You'll never want to throw out your carrot tops again. I simply cut up the carrot tops, put them in a small blender, and then I added some basil. I mixed up the carrot tops, basil, and a good chunk of garlic. Next, I added some olive oil, blended it up again, and I added some Parmesan and some pine nuts. Once the potatoes are done, I removed them from the oven, and we had some leftover salmon from the night before. I spooned the potatoes onto a plate, the carrot top pesto on the side. The next night I made a spring quiche with an einkorn crust. The einkorn crust I will show you in next week's video how to make that. And using my hands, I knead it a little bit into a dough ball, and I put a beeswax wrap on top and put it in the refrigerator for about half an hour. In the meantime, I had washed and cleaned some leeks and cut the leek into very thin slices. I grated a chunk of cheese. We love using Gruyere cheese, but you can use a Gouda or any mild cheese, not a cheddar. After half an hour, I spread some flour on my work surface and floured my rolling pin. I took the einkorn pastry dough from the refrigerator and rolled it into a round, flipping it over a few times so that it wouldn't stick to the work surface so much. And don't worry about the raw edges, you can fix that later. I have a springform pan that I added parchment paper to the bottom, and then I transferred the dough disc to the springform pan and press it onto the sides. And if you have areas where the dough comes up really high, you can cut that and fix those areas where the dough doesn't come up so high. And because I like to keep things simple, make it easy for myself, I use the same bowl and crack 6 eggs into it. Add the sour cream. Salt and pepper. All the cheese. And set that aside. All right, remove the dough from the refrigerator and add thin slices of ham to the bottom. Now sprinkle the leeks over the ham. And lastly, the egg cheese mixture. And I spread it just about to cover all the leeks so none of the leeks are sticking out. Then I bake that in the oven for about 45 minutes or until the quiche is set and golden brown on top. If you're interested in more recipes, I have an entire playlist right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.